was homeschooled. Like, my mom pulled me out of school the end of my 5th grade year, and then put me back in school 7th grade. And it's like, it's crazy how much you miss out on socially in even just a year. Like, I can't imagine up till 7th grade, 6th grade, whatever, missing out on that social growth. I remember I was in what I would have called the popular group of dudes in elementary school, which, looking back, seems fucking ridiculous that I had quantified them that.
But I mean, it's what we do.
It's
humans,
like
we're pack animals,
right?
That's why, even though all the news and everything is saying, don't congregate with groups of 10 or more people, people are still like, no, fuck this, let's go have a party, because we need to be together. Like, we need to. That's why so many people are like, I don't want to social distance. I don't want to isolate myself, because we're pack animals and we need that. So like, it makes sense that you would go, we're the coolest motherfuckers on the playground. Like, it's what we do.
Yes. It's still weird to me, though.
Oh, it's absolutely weird, but it's something that we.
Yeah. Reality is weird.
Let me ask you guys a question.
Sure.
As being homeschooled, so Dwayne, you and I we're not that far apart in age from each other.
Only a couple years.
Jack and I are very far apart in age from each other. I know that now a lot of homeschooling, there's like groups. So like, if this house is homeschooling, then they might get in touch with this house who's also homeschooling, and did you have that kind of a community, or were you just like, you're sitting at home with your mom learning math, and then she makes you a sandwich? Like, how did that work for you guys?
I would say most families did that route. They'd get together as families and do everything that. My family in itself was not. My mother, not a social being, not a social girl in the sense of like making sure that I have a social life. She didn't. That wasn't something. I don't think that she really was adamant. She was more about like schooling me, making sure I'm disciplined. A hard worker, more motivated. They didn't really deal with the social aspect. So what I grew up thinking, which is so laughable now, like I thought I was the next Steven Spielberg. I would spend hours and hours just in my head, just acting out scenes, doing everything, just thinking like the world needs to know about this, about this scene. So it literally, and I remember so many instances of my mom being like, "Hey, Cole wants to hang out. Do you want Cole over here?" And I go, "Do you think Cole can keep up with this, Mom? This imagination? No chance. Tell Cole to get lost." And
get out of here, Cole.
Get out of here, Cole. I remember,
were those actual things you would say?
Not in that articulated tone, but I'd be like, "No, Mom, I kind of want to do lightsabers now. Cole's not really that great at lightsabers."
Yeah,
like that. That's literally. I was like so nice kid about it. But I was genuinely like, no one can keep up with this imagination.
Yeah.
And that's what reigned supreme in homeschool. Not like who's a cool kid. What reigned supreme was like how.
Yeah, well, because you were the coolest kid in your own mind,
and
because you were the only kid, which makes sense. And it's interesting because I feel like all kids have that thought of like, you can't compete with this imagination, or you're not as good. But like, you realize through interacting with other kids that like, oh, wait a minute, their imagination lines up with what I've got going on. So maybe if we can pool our resources, we'll have a great day. And so I could understand that, like, being isolated like that, you're like, well, I'm hot shit at King Mountain in this house.
Yeah, absolutely. And
nobody can fuck with my lightsaber skills, you sons of bitches.
Yeah, and thank God girls exist, because they brought me out of that whole.
Oh yeah, that'll do it.
Because the guys that I stopped caring about that, I was like, oh, like I can imagine everything except a woman in my life, and so I was like, all right, we got to stay away from the imagination. Focus more on chicks, Yeah. So I kind of snapped out of it like 4th grade and started hanging out with more kids my age and stuff like that. So it was good.
Yeah.
And Dwayne, what was your homeschool experience like?
Well, so like the school itself was very much so in the home, no social aspects to it. But my mom was also linked up with like a community of other homeschool people, right? So we would do like field trips where we'd go out to this Indian reservation, or we went to the roller drum or Ice World as groups of kids, you know. But
isn't it isolating? Like, you really spent so much time just in your house, right?
yeah, I mean, I have an unfair advantage. There's 5 there's 5 kids, including myself and my family, and I was in a small town where most of my friends lived fairly close to me, and so like I remember Clint Post, he lived like half a mile down the street, and then Kerry Brown, he lived right around the corner from me, and then Josh White up the street, and then Dane Edmondson down the street. Like all these guys, like I was able to go do things while I wasn't.
Yeah, because you had the schooling first, and then they took you out.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a different experience there. Yeah. Okay, all right, that makes sense.
A big part of why my mom had pulled me out of school was, so the Mrs. Gillum, she was my 5th grade teacher, and she came at my mom and said, "You're not spending enough time at home with your son." And I had been diagnosed with ADHD, A.D.D and A.D.H.D when I was in 4th grade. I looking back, I recognize it as I didn't give a fuck, but at the time I couldn't pay attention because I didn't care. If I can
interrupt for a second, just sorry, but I had always thought that ADD and ADHD were the same thing, just like one was for adults and one was kids.
That's inaccurate.
Okay, well, yeah, so that's why I wanted to.
Yeah. So ADD is attention deficit disorder, right?
Yes.
And whenever you're dealing with the ADHD, you're adding a hyperactive aspect to it.
Okay, that's what the H stands for.
Yeah.
I feel like I knew that, but also I might not have known that. So thank you for clarifying. Anyway, but
I honestly didn't know that at all, so I learned something.
Yeah. Anyway, please continue.
So they went as far in my 4th grade class. They went as far as to have. I had a headset that I wore that the teacher had, like the sending box with a microphone, and it sent her voice directly to my ears, and still wasn't effective. Like I just didn't care about what they were talking about. Like I thought there was something wrong with me,
right?
Because I wasn't paying attention, and I couldn't because I just didn't care. And that followed me throughout my entire school career, I guess. Obviously not career, but like I just didn't care about school. Never did. I got horrible grades. I dropped out of high school. Like, no joke. My senior year, a month before graduation, I had missed 37 days, complete days, my senior year. And I did move out of my parents' house when I was just after I turned 18, and I was an independent student at Boise High. And I had free reign to do whatever the fuck I wanted. I could sign myself out of class.
Go to school, bro.
Yeah, I just and I had started drinking and using a lot of pot and other drugs at the time, and it just that was more important to me. And like the only thing that I had going for me before my senior year of high school was I was extremely athletic. I did track, I did wrestling, football, I cheerleaded. And I worked out. I did weightlifting competitions.
I'll say something though. That's crazy. That as soon as you said you didn't focus or couldn't focus at school, I literally was like, he must be a beast with his fitness. Like absolutely, any person that I've ever encountered. Like I used to play rugby with All-Americans, and I'm talking about the dumbest kids on earth. And when it comes to school, like literally, and even in interactions, you're like, "How are you surviving, dude, in this world? You're so dumb." But when they touch the rugby field or use their hands or body in any way, Mozart. It was literally crazy how in one area you couldn't be as gifted, but in another you could be just godly at it. It's so strange, so crazy. So
and that's I feel like that's true for a lot of people. And that like me, for example, like I'm funny, and it's really the only thing I've ever been. Like I can't do percentages. Like I can't science escapes me. I know what a fraction is, But, like, I'm worried that if I do have to start homeschooling my child because of the current situation,
Yes.
that thank the fucking gods for Google, because
Dude.
I don't know what I'm going to do. Like,
Dude,
unless
for
I
real.
can
That's
teach him
so
how to
funny.
craft a joke, I don't know how I'm going to help my child.
Can't get a high school degree in crafting jokes.
You can't. You
No.
can't.
You can barely get a job crafting jokes. So
That's fair.
Yeah.
But no, I just think, and what I think is very fascinating is that you grew up dumb. You think you're dumb
Yeah.
because of that.
I straight up
Like,
thought I was dumb,
but-
like for real.
Yeah, I know. But the thing is, like, you're just dumb in that. Well, not dumb, but your mind isn't energized by that aspect of life.
Right.
Yet in another way, look at all those sports you could do.
Yeah.
So it's like you had no business, putting yourself down as a human being just because you weren't doing the thing you were never supposed to do.
Right.
Like, I think that was a major problem with me in school.
Yeah. In school in general, or for you?
Well, just with self-esteem and stuff like that. Like, look, how much of a rung down does your self-esteem go because you couldn't focus up at school?
Well, it was really bad for a while, but then at a certain point, I realized
snap
that,
out of it, yeah.
like, my intellect wasn't a thing that I questioned anymore, because I could take a book that I wanted to read and read it faster than anyone else could. And I could retain all of the information that I was putting into my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many people that can't finish a book cover to cover. And
It's just like that thing. Just like some people, you can finish some people can, shoot a basketball so much better than I can. Yet they
Right.
can't read a book cover to cover.
Right.
It's all. I think that is something that the school system is what I was getting at. The school system missing out is like people are gifted in certain areas,
Right.
but if you're not all gifted in one area, like academia, you're considered dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's what's that quote? Is everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by
its
his
ability-
ability to climb a tree,
right.
He'll grow
then
up thinking it's
he'll
stupid.
grow up thinking he's stupid.
Albert
Right.
Einstein.
And like, I think that like what you were saying, Jack, is I think this is where you were going with it. Maybe you weren't, and if I'm wrong, then tell me. But like, that's what I don't like about school in general, is that like they teach everybody. I feel like they're just teaching to the tests, and they're teaching to
Yep.
create
Yep.
like obedient workers. Meanwhile, Jack might be a more visual learner,
Absolutely.
and Dwayne might be a more verbal learner, and you can't teach the two of you the same way.
Right.
But everybody's trying to, and that's why so many
Bingo.
people fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Because you need to really, and I know it's hard in some places where you have 30, 35 students at a time that you have to deal with, so you can't necessarily cater to each and every individual kid. But there should be some, and I feel like they're kind of I don't know if, the inner workings of it, right? But
Yeah.
I feel like they're trying to move it in that direction.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 15 years removed from high school.
Yeah,
And
but
I haven't been
20.
back. Right?
And I guarantee you, the second you dropped out of high school, didn't you learn so much? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
You've learned so much more out of school than in school, right?
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
I
Because
learned-
I didn't have to learn what I was being told, what I had to learn. I was learning what I wanted to learn.
and what was useful to your life.
Yeah.
Like I'm guarantee all the books you read, you could apply immediately the day after, right?
Absolutely.
Like math, that's crazy.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say about school though is the most useful skill school taught me was to constantly get out of my head. Like having to requiring myself to do things like homework, like sporting events, like going to class, constantly growing up, like ignoring my objections to it really took me out of myself in a way, and I feel like that really helped me grow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure.
I wish I had been mature enough to have the discipline to be able to pull something like that out at a younger age. I didn't grasp that concept until way later, like we were talking a little earlier.
So, we're getting a little low on time. One thing that Dwayne, you introduced recently into the podcast is what are you going to do for growth in this next week? We'll start with Jack. What are you going to do this week to help you grow, whether that be emotionally, mentally, physically, if you're going to get lifts?
Spiritually,
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I'm really working on right now is cleanliness. cleanliness. Just it sounds not as it did for me originally when I went on this cleanliness journey. It